I've got to say, I'm deeply honored to be here and to be around all of your brilliant brains these last several days. I've been blown away by Charity and, of course, the Council of Dads yesterday. I don't think there's a dry eye in the audience yesterday, but I'm glad that I'm following a stool sample and not Charity this morning. But the bar has been set so high with all the talks that have been set here that it's going to be very easy for me to pass underneath that bar back and forth without, bonking myself in the head. But what I wanted to do is just tell you a little bit about myself, a couple of the big adventures in my life. Today, I'll start out by telling you that I feel a little bit like Forrest Gump. I've led an incredibly charmed life in many ways. It's not been perfect. I've had some stumbles and fumbles along the way. But as Mark said, I have stood on top of the planet. I've seen our world from orbital velocities. I've seen the oceans from far below the surface and many beautiful places in between. I've had a life of exploration and adventure. But here today, I would have never imagined this, but I'm an opening act for Ozzy freaking Osbourne. So how does this happen? I don't get it, but it's going to be really cool. I'm very much looking forward to Sharon and Ozzy talking today, as I'm sure all of you are. I just will tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in the shadow of the space program. My father was. I need a clicker, by the way. Do you guys have a clicker for me? Okay, good deal. I grew up in the shadow of the space program. I had model rockets and posters on the wall. My father worked on the Apollo program. He's a real rocket scientist. He designed the F-1 engines on the tail end of the Saturn V booster that first took men to the surface of the moon. And of course, we didn't have Buzz Lightyear in my day, but we had other cultural influences, and it just seemed very logical that I would one day be able to go fly in space. And so I guess I wasn't a particularly bright kid. I certainly didn't understand statistics and odds and how much of a long shot that would be. But with blonde ambition, ignorance, and enthusiasm, I kind of went for it. And it certainly has been a really wonderful strategy in my life, being able to go do some really exciting things in life. The space program, of course, started in the early 60s with human space flight. And these are a bunch of hard-living, vodka-drinking Soviets, but they're incredible in their technology. The lead designer, Sergei Korolev, is in the center. And then Yuri Gagarin, of course, was the first human being to orbit the Earth. April 12th, the year of my birth, 1961. I was born several months after that. So I'm a second-generation space traveler. And of course, the Americans had a counterpoint to the Soviets in the form of the Mercury program. These are the Mercury astronauts. Alan Shepard was the first American to have a suborbital flight, and then another astronaut, John Glenn, was the first to orbit the Earth for the Americans. And I don't like name droppers, but Senator John Glenn is a really good friend of mine. And it's really funny if you talk to him about this movie, The Right Stuff. If you've ever seen a Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry movie, when he gets really beet red and the big vein pops out on his forehead, go ahead, punk, make my day. That's the kind of reaction that you get out of John when someone mentions The Right Stuff. John and his crew and the Mercury guys had the real stuff. They were incredibly brave. And it was an incredible honor for me later in life to serve as his personal physician on STS-95 when he returned to space on his 77th year. So as a professional astronaut, it's actually quite a bit of work. We have to operate in some very harsh environments, going out on spacewalks. We fly robotic arms. We do lots and lots of different types of complex science. So the selection for this type of role is quite involved, and we're going to be working with NASA for many, many years. So every sort of medical screening that can be done on the human body is done, including some that were actually created for astronauts, maybe just as torture devices. Up in the upper left here, you can see what's called the personnel rescue sphere. And it's actually designed to figure out if you have claustrophobia. And so as an astronaut hopeful, you go to Houston, Texas, one of 100 people vying for the job. And they tell you to hop in this thing. It's completely pitch black. They put electrode monitors on your chest. And they don't tell you how long you're going to be in there. And thankfully, I'm very comfortable in small, confined spaces. I fell asleep. My resting heart rate is in the high 30s. And the tech that was doing this test on me was kind of apologetic when he had to shake the bag and get me out of this contraption. So I passed the test, and thankfully I was accepted. But one of the things that I want to do with you here today is suggest to you that spaceflight in the future is going to involve all of us. There's going to be a place for everyone, and it's not going to involve lots and lots of training, lots and lots of screening. It's going to be something that will be part of all of our lives, and I want to encourage you to participate, and it will change your life forever. So one of the greatest days in my life, certainly the best day on the job ever for me, took place on this mission called STS-120, and it was a very complex space station assembly flight. Let me go back one. Here we go. So this is the space station as it appeared when we arrived. Our mission was essentially to take this T-shaped module on the very top here and relocate it on the very tip of the space station. And then once it got out there, we were going to deploy these large solar array panels. Unfortunately, when we got it out there, as the solar array panels were being commanded to extend, there was a frayed guide wire that started to rip apart this solar array panel. Very, very significant issue because it was unsafe for us to undock the space shuttle. They were concerned that this solar array panel would actually rip apart and hit the space shuttle, making it unsafe for us to return home. Moreover, it was impossible for us to launch any of the subsequent missions to the space station, the additional laboratory modules that needed the power from these solar arrays. So what took place in the next 72 hours is nothing short of brilliant. And that's what NASA has a habit of doing. They take the impossible and make it look very easy, but it really wasn't. We had hundreds of engineers around the country working around the clock, developing a plan to get an astronaut, me, out to the very tip of the space station, further than we'd ever traveled before, to effect a repair, essentially to do surgery on this solar array panel. And so what we had to do is we had to generate these sutures. These are what we called cufflinks. They're actually metal tabs on the end of a large wire. And then at the end of this 90-foot-long robotic boom, in a cobbled-together robotic system that we had never envisioned before, I had to position myself at the very tip of this thing. And you can see my buddy Doug Wheelock here at the base of the solar array. He's my spotter, essentially, and he would kind of give me cues as to when this big solar array would start to drift towards me. And the reason that was so important, this solar array panel had 100 volts of energy coursing through its veins. This is a very dangerous patient to be working on. It looks gold and shiny and pretty, but it's actually not a safe place to be. And so all the metal parts of my suit, the wrist disconnects, had to be insulated with special Kapton tape so that I wouldn't get shocked. I'm in a 100% oxygen spacesuit, so electricity and oxygen don't get along very well. Bad things can happen. So we were able to install 5 of these cufflinks. Here you can see at the very end of the spacewalk, after 7 hours and 20 minutes, we had installed 5 of these cufflinks across the breadth of the solar array panel. And here it is on our undocking and fly around of the space station. Just gorgeous. And this really is an amazing accomplishment for NASA and for the world. A lot of people look upon this whole evolution as kind of an Apollo 13 moment for the Space Shuttle Space Station era. To be able to cobble together this kind of a solution in just 72 hours. It's not like you can go to Home Depot and buy a solar array repair kit. You've got to make things with the supplies that you have on board. So all of us have bucket lists, I think. Everyone knows what a bucket list is. We all have big dreams. You may have heard the term Walter Mitty. Walter Mitty was a fictional character with a vivid imagination. A lot of us have aspirations to do kind of crazy things, to travel the world, maybe to climb mountains, which is one of my passions, and I'm going to share some of my stories of the mountains with you here in a moment. But people are living longer, healthier, more productive lives, and it's important to have big dreams and to go for them. And I'm going to share my story of Everest here in just a minute. But I just wanted to point out one of my colleagues here, Buzz Aldrin. He's 80 years old or thereabouts, and I give him a lot of credit for, at this age, going back to Dancing with the Stars. It took a lot of bravery, I think, to go do that. Somebody should have told him that he really isn't that good of a dancer, but you're never too old to dance. So here we are at Mount Everest, and this is, of course, the mountain of my dreams. I've been fascinated with this mountain since I was 5 years old. The things that I read about were all the adventurers, all the explorers of days gone by. So Mallory, Hillary, and so on were also in my reading library as a young boy. And so to get a chance to take a shot at Mount Everest was a dream come true. So this is 2008. You can see the summit of Everest up on the upper left here. Not a good day to climb to the summit today. You can see probably 100-mile-an-hour winds up there. But on the 59th day of my expedition, something really awful happened, and this was really one of the defining moments of my life. I developed excruciating low back pain. It was like I had a Rambo knife jammed into my low back, and I didn't know what had happened. I had been climbing very, very well. I was in incredible shape. I was at 24,500 feet at Camp 3 on my way towards the summit, within 24 hours of topping out on the mountain. I woke up the following morning, and I hadn't slept more than 30 seconds that night. Every 30 seconds or so, I'd have to shift and try and get into another position. And I was just completely at red line, completely exhausted. Here I am. You can see me. I'm trying to stretch a little bit, but there's just no way. I'm writhing in pain. I had to have my teammates even put on my crampons. They're changing my oxygen bottle now. It's really not a good place to be. And of course, it's a very difficult decision what to do at this point. I heard, this is 6:30 in the morning, I heard my teammates on the first wave of climbers successfully reaching the summit and celebrating. And I knew that within 24 hours, it could have been me. I could see right over my right shoulder there, the summit. It was only a vertical mile above me, which maybe sounds a lot to you, but for me, that's kind of an exciting notion to think that it's just a vertical mile and 1 day away from topping out on the summit of Mount Everest. And I had to decide whether I wanted to risk my own well-being, whether I could continue towards the summit, and then whether or not it made sense for me to not only take my own life at risk, but to potentially put my teammates at risk. And so I knew that if I continued on, their safety, their summit success would be jeopardized, and also my own life. And so I had to do a gut check, and ultimately I turned around from the summit, not knowing whether or not I'd ever be able to return. And it was an awful moment. Descending from this point, 2,500 feet of almost vertical snow and ice, doing arm rappels, 2,500 feet of arm rappels with a crippled back is just brutal. And especially when I had tears welling in my eyes, it was just an awful experience. But I'm a very optimistic, enthusiastic person, and so for me, I always kind of think of the cup half to three-quarters full. And so on the bright side, I had an unlimited amount of ice. And so every 20 or 30 minutes, I would just lay down wherever I was. And this is my buddy Bob Lowry, who helped me a lot during this descent, as well as my Sherpa buddy Kami. And slowly but surely, it took 4 times as long to get down to base camp. But I did make it. And then it was a 36-mile trek out to Lukla so that I could get an airplane ride out to Kathmandu and eventually get back home. And of course, the pain didn't go away. It was still there with me every second of the day. But as fate would have it, I had a patient to take care of. Even with my crippled back, I had Monty here, who had a serious nosebleed. He had lost 20% of his blood volume. In the cold, dry air of extreme altitude, your blood vessels get very thin and brittle, and he bled out substantially. So I had to stop the bleeding in his nose and hobble down with him. He was in even more serious condition than me, so I was able to, as his personal physician, ride down with him in his medevac helicopter, which was really a godsend. So I've been told that one of the cardinal rules of public speaking is to never moon your audience. I didn't know that. So I decided that I would go ahead and redact this photo. And I got a little carried away. And I made her incognito as well. This is my surgical anesthesiologist who took great care of me. I didn't feel anything on this whole experience. But the reason I show you this picture is because this is a really serious problem. I had a nerve impingement, L2, L3, fairly high in my back, compressing on the nerve roots going down my left leg. So I had numbness and weakness and excruciating pain. 2 hours after this operation, I was up and walking. 8 weeks after this operation, I was in the gym without restriction. And then about 2 weeks after that, I had the courage to ask my family and friends if I could go back. And that was actually pretty scary. And it wasn't well received initially, but I think they recognized that I was not going to let this thing go. You know, it's not in my personality to let things go. This is a challenge that I had to meet. And so meet it I did. I went back a year later. And this is my arrival on the summit of Mount Everest. It's 29,035 feet above sea level. I arrived at 4 a.m. Exactly per plan. I wanted to be there for an orbital sunrise. The sun started to rise exactly at 4:05 in the morning. And it's a very tiny summit. It's perhaps the size of 6 chairs coupled together here. Very, very steep on one side, down into Tibet. You can see the curvature of the earth behind me here. And some Tibetan prayer flags that are positioned on the summit, as well as a golden Buddha, which is really kind of beautiful. So I was team physician for the Discovery Channel. I was part of a show called Everest Beyond the Limit. And so I had a Sherpa with a helmet camera following me up the mountain. So it's kind of cool. I have a full record of that whole ascent for my permanent record. But of course, the first thing you do when you get up to the top of Everest is you got to take your bling photos. So got your family photo you've got to take. But the other item that I wanted to share with you here, this is actually a piece of the moon. And the reason I took that with me, I obviously I have connections at NASA, so I can get certain things that other people might not. But what you might not realize is that Sir Edmund Hillary and Neil Armstrong became really close friends later in life. They actually traveled to the North Pole together, stayed in very close contact up until Sir Edmund's passing a few years ago. So my intention was to actually call Neil from the summit of Everest. And I had a satellite phone, I was ready to go, but it's really difficult to dial a tiny little satellite phone with a gloved hand, especially when your fingers are getting really, really cold. So didn't make the call, but to give it closure here, well, I'll share with you what I did with that sample in a little bit here. But the significance of standing on top of Mount Everest, I probably can't put it into full clarity for you, but I think the things that we work for the hardest, the things that came to us the hardest, mean the most to us. And this was the hardest thing I've ever done physically or mentally by a long shot. It took everything that I had. And so the elation that I felt in those 30 minutes that I had on top of Everest, I'll never forget. And it's strange, but I think about being on the top of Everest almost every day. It's something that, little reminders that come to my brain. I think back on the summit success, or if I have a challenge ahead of me, I think, well, I summited Everest. I can do this. So I do drive a lot of power out of that experience. So I'll tell you a little joke at this point. This is mountaineering humor. You may or may not get it. Mountaineers kind of think it's funny, but this is the summit ridge above the Hillary Step but below the main summit. And of course, you can see it's incredible drop-offs either side here. The adage is, if you're going to fall at this point, you definitely don't want to fall to the right. Don't go to the right. It's 8,000 feet straight down. If you're going to fall, fall to the left, because it's 10,000 feet, and you'll live a little bit longer. So, mountaineers are a strange lot. But in any event, this is the top of the world here, and you can clearly see the curvature of the Earth. For all intents and purposes, I felt like I was out on a spacewalk. I had a big down suit on, kind of like a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I had big down gloves on, oxygen mask on, goggles. I was in space for all intents and purposes. The air was almost as thin as being in space as well. You can hear how cold it is. The snow crunching beneath my crampons. It's about 40 below, and then with wind chill, perhaps 55 or 60 below. So a nice balmy day on the top of the world here. But thankfully, no clouds. And so here's what I did with that special sample. This is the piece of the moon is on the right here. 4 tiny pieces of the Sea of Tranquility that Neil collected on the moon. And on the left is a piece of the summit of Mount Everest. I mounted this very nicely, and then we launched it to the International Space Station where it resides. This is my buddy Bob Behnken, and by his left knee is that plaque. And this is in a module called Tranquility. So I think that's kind of a really neat closure. And it's there to inspire future explorers that will use this vantage point for going outwards in the solar system. So hopefully I've given you a flavor for some of the really exciting kinds of adventures that have been on my bucket list, and maybe some of these things have been on yours as well. I want to convince you that of the two, of flying in space and climbing big mountains, you probably ought to go towards space. It's much more comfortable. It's much less work. On the right here, you can see me arriving back at Everest Base Camp, and I lost 25 pounds. It's an extreme environment. I'm pretty gaunt here, but space is a place where you can go, and so we have had several people already fly to the International Space Station using Russian Soyuz capsules, and Esther Dyson is here, who trained to be a cosmonaut, a spaceflight participant, and I hope she gets to go here very soon, one way or another. But I hope in the broader context that many of you will get a chance to go, and there are going to be opportunities. That's the message I want to share with you. So, the price point is a little bit high right now, but let's work on it, okay? So, space is for everyone. There's a burgeoning industry. Spaceports are being developed around the world. This is the spaceport in New Mexico, where Virgin Galactic is planning to begin their operations. But to put this in kind of a historic context, think about what happened in the last century. We came from the horseless carriage to initial flight, to Lindbergh's transatlantic flight, and you saw earlier in the week all the air route traffic around the world, the globalization via air traffic, that Lindbergh here actually was the gate opener towards. And now we've traveled to the moon, we've established space stations, and now we're going to have much more affordable access to space. And I can't help but think in the next century that all of us are going to be using space travel on a regular basis. We'll be able to board a suborbital spacecraft like a Virgin Galactic spacecraft that you'll see here in a minute, and do suborbital skips and get from here to Heathrow in 45 minutes. Those types of efficiencies are not just science fiction. That's possible and likely, in my opinion. Not to dwell on this at all, but you can see the little dots here. Those are spaceports that are actually being built or considered. And then they also exist around the world. This is a global industry. American industry is actually at the forefront of this. The launch service providers are primarily here in the US, but there are other vehicles that are being developed around the world that will use these spaceports. So this is, as I said, not science fiction. This is real hardware. Spaceship One, this is the second generation vehicle, but Spaceship One has already flown to suborbital space to the 100-kilometer mark that qualifies as the definition of space. And Scaled Composites and Virgin Galactic are in the test program. They've done a drop test already of this vehicle, and in the next 12 to 18 months, they'll be doing routine flights to low Earth or to suborbital space. 6 passengers, 2 pilots, so there's enough room for some of us. And there are other vehicles as well that are in the pipeline. This is called Lynx, being developed at Mojave as well. This is Blue Origin, funded by Jeff Bezos of Amazon. So these are entrepreneurs that are putting their skin in the game, several $100 million, but they're building these spacecrafts. This will initially go to suborbital space. Ultimately, it'll take people to and from the space station probably, and maybe spaceflight participants or tourists to various destinations. SpaceX, founded by Elon Musk out in California, of course of PayPal fame. He's put a lot of money into this as well, and he will be delivering cargo in the next few months to the International Space Station, and ultimately this will be developed into a capsule that's capable of carrying crews, and NASA is actually going to be procuring services from these guys to carry its astronauts to and from the space station. So this is real. These are real rockets. Bob Bigelow out in Las Vegas has already launched 2 spacecraft. They're inflatable modules that have been in space for several months, actually several years now. And he's building hardware now that will be the foundation for space stations that all of us can go travel to if you have $25 million. But seriously, it's small countries and industries will be able to lease these space stations and go do work, and potentially even for tourism purposes. So getting back to what it takes to actually go fly in space. Well, to be a professional astronaut, if they're going to spend millions of dollars on you to do spacewalks and science and robotics and things, they need to know everything about you. And so they do every test under the sun to find out if you're healthy, because they want you to stay with the program for many years and be able to serve. But if you're just going on a short trip, you don't really need to do very much at all. You need to sign informed consent. You have to promise not to sue, and then of course you're going to have to go through the TSA metal detector, and take off your space boots and put them on the conveyor belt and all that jazz. But it's really not that big of a deal. I think you can do it, and I want you to do it. So all you really need to be able to do is write a check at this point. So just to compare and contrast the 2 types of programs, the government programs are more by exclusion. The commercial operators, of course, are going to want to be as inclusive as possible. Minimal medical standards are required, because you'll just be a one-time flyer, or maybe go 2 or 3 times if you really want to. But you won't have many responsibilities other than floating there, enjoying the experience, and looking out the window. So how do we train for flight, and what would be a good thing to do just to make sure that you would like it? Well, happy Halloween, by the way. So experiencing different gravitational fields would be a really good thing. So we have centrifuges. On the left is a centrifuge that my company, Wiley, operates in San Antonio, and this is another one that's operated by another operator in Philadelphia. But there are opportunities to experience that launch profile. You can also get into a zero-G parabolic aircraft, as you see here on the right, Zero-G Corporation. And I love this photo. This is a photograph of Professor Stephen Hawking, perhaps the most brilliant mind of our time, certainly one of the greatest physicists of all time. He's been wheelchair-bound for the majority of his life, but he had an opportunity to fulfill his life dream of floating freely in space. And you can see the joy of floating in space, and that's what I would describe spaceflight to you. It's just pure joy. And so to give him an opportunity to do this is just an amazing thing. And I think Peter Diamandis is here. I know he gave a talk last year. He's a real pioneer in this whole sector. He created not only Zero-G Corporation with Ray Cronise, who spoke just yesterday, but he created International Space University and the X Prize and lots of things that are really starting to get a groundswell of support for this industry. And so it's very exciting to be a part of all this. So I'm gonna wrap up here because I see the clock has gone to 0, but I just have a few last images that I think you're really gonna like here. So if you really squint at this photograph, you may be able to see yourselves. This is, of course, San Diego, and there you are. It's a little bit blurry, but one of the visuals that I'd like to share with you, the human side of spaceflight, it is just the most powerful, profound human experience to float freely in space, to look down on your home planet, and to then look off into the distance and see to the beginnings of time. You know, to see the trillions and trillions of stars that are out there. Your eyes are always drawn back towards planet Earth, though, and it may be a little bit cliche, but you can't help but think of our home planet as spaceship Earth. It's warm, inviting. It glows. It has life even from that vantage point of several hundred miles up. It's breathtaking and captivating. And so one of the things that I always get asked when I go talk to school kids is, you know, they're studying planets and things like that, and they always ask me, "What's your favorite planet?" And I say, "Well, Earth." You know, this is where everything that I know, everyone that I love and care about is on planet Earth. But to have this opportunity to have this vantage point, to see continents in a single glance, to see hurricanes, and to fly through the northern lights, to see the planets at a distance, to see the Milky Way in great detail, it changes you forever. I think all of us that have this privilege of flying in space, at a minimum, come back environmentalists. Not necessarily the Birkenstock-wearing, tree-hugging type, but you know, the real profound sense of we need to protect our environment. We need to do everything that we can to pay it forward for our children, because it really is a fragile environment. This is our atmosphere on edge. It's very, very paper thin. This is a sunrise. We see a sunrise or sunset every 45 minutes as we orbit the Earth. The full spectrum of light, it's just brilliant. I had the real privilege of flying over Mount Everest on one of my flights, and this is a photograph I took looking straight down on the summit of Mount Everest. But one of the other great things about being in space is just the ability to see places that you've never seen before, and then do this mental transformation and think about, well, I'd really love to go there one day. I'd love to just, you know, in the Star Trek sense, you know, buzz on down there and then buzz back up and continue my flight. But it's been an amazing place for me to identify the places that I want to go see around the world. The colors are just so vibrant. They can't really be reproduced in photographic emulsion, but the brilliant blues of the coral reefs just suck you right in. It's phenomenal. This is the Holy Land, the Nile Delta, the Sinai, and so on. Of course, flying over a hurricane is a really powerful image as well. So I guess what I'd like to do here in closing is just give you one final thought. It may be a bit of a stretch. I hope you aren't dismissive of it, because it might seem a little simplistic or naive, but I really do hope that all of you at one point in your life get a chance to experience what I've seen, at least a fraction of what I've seen in space. I do think it would affect you profoundly. I can't predict how it would work for each and every one of you, but the add-on to that is, what would it be like if we could take some of our political leaders to see their Earth from space? What would it be like if we could take some of the people that would do harm to one another or to the planet, and they could see the planet Earth from space? I think some of the problems that ail us would merely go away. It would be inconceivable for them to pursue anything that would do harm to this beautiful planet of ours. Thank you very much.